Welcome to my Storytime by mybooksummary.com. Get ready for quick wisdom of countless stories and explore. The Syrian Civil War, which began in 2011 and continues to shape the political and social landscape of Syria to this day, is one of the most devastating and complex conflicts in modern history. What started as a peaceful protest movement inspired by the Arab Spring quickly escalated into a brutal and multifaceted war involving numerous internal and external actors, foreign powers, and extremist groups. The war has claimed hundreds of thousands of lives, displaced millions of people, and left Syria's infrastructure in ruins. Yet, the conflict's complexities are such that a simple solution remains elusive, and the war continues to rage with no clear resolution in sight. In this detailed exploration of the Syrian Civil War, we will trace its origins, key events, international involvement, human cost, and the ongoing consequences of this war that has not only ravaged Syria but also impacted the Middle East and the wider world. Introduction: the spark of rebellion. The roots of the Syrian Civil War can be traced to the broader wave of political unrest that swept through the Arab world in 2011. This wave, known as the Arab Spring, was marked by protests and uprisings against entrenched autocratic regimes in Tunisia, Egypt, Libya, Yemen, and Syria. In Syria, President Bashar al-Assad had been in power since 2000, inheriting the presidency from his father, Hafez al-Assad, who had ruled the country with an iron fist for nearly 3 decades. Syria, like many other countries in the Arab world, faced widespread dissatisfaction among its people. The country was plagued by corruption, economic stagnation, human rights abuses, and limited political freedoms. Amid these frustrations, Syrians took to the streets in March 2011, inspired by the successful uprisings in Tunisia and Egypt, to demand greater freedoms and reforms. However, the Assad regime's response to these protests was swift and violent. Security forces opened fire on demonstrators, and a brutal crackdown ensued. The government's heavy-handed tactics only fueled anger, and protests soon spread to other cities, with demands escalating from reform to the resignation of President Assad. The escalation, from protest to civil war. 1. The first shots fired. The first major turning point in the conflict came in the summer of 2011. As protests grew larger and more widespread, the Assad regime began using military force to suppress the demonstrations. In response, many Syrians took up arms against the government, forming loosely organized rebel groups that sought to overthrow Assad's regime. The Syrian army, one of the most powerful in the region, unleashed a brutal campaign to crush the rebellion. Cities like Homs and Daraa became battlegrounds, with the government's forces employing airstrikes, artillery, and ground assaults to quash the insurgency. Meanwhile, rebel groups began to organize more effectively, and the Free Syrian Army, FSA, was formed in opposition to the Assad government. By 2012, the situation had escalated into full-scale civil war. As the conflict spread across Syria, the country became a battleground between pro-government forces and a wide array of rebel factions. These factions, often lacking coordination, represented a range of ideologies, from moderate Democrats to Islamic extremists. 2. The rise of extremism. As the war dragged on, extremist groups began to emerge within the ranks of the opposition. The most notorious of these groups was the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, ISIS, which declared a caliphate in 2014. While ISIS initially began as an offshoot of al-Qaeda, it soon became a dominant force in Syria and Iraq, taking advantage of the chaos of the war to seize large swaths of territory. ISIS's rise in Syria represented a new and terrifying chapter in the conflict. The group's brutal tactics, including public executions, mass killings, and the persecution of religious minorities, shocked the world. The group's ability to control territory and recruit foreign fighters raised alarm both in the region and globally, prompting a military response from the US-led coalition. ISIS's presence in Syria complicated the war even further. The presence of both the Assad regime and extremist groups like ISIS created a situation where the war was no longer just about regime change, but about containing terrorism and preventing the spread of extremism. This made it difficult for rebel factions and foreign powers to work together effectively, as many had different priorities and goals. 2. The internationalization of the conflict. 1. The involvement of foreign powers. Syria's civil war quickly became a proxy war, with numerous foreign powers becoming involved, each backing different factions according to their own strategic interests. At the heart of the international struggle was the question of whether Bashar al-Assad would remain in power or be ousted. The Assad regime was supported by two major allies, Russia and Iran. Russia, under President Vladimir Putin, provided military and diplomatic support, seeing Assad as a critical ally in maintaining Russia's influence in the Middle East. Russian military intervention in 2015, with airstrikes and ground troops, helped turn the tide of the war in Assad's favor, allowing his forces to retake large parts of the country from rebel groups. Iran, a key regional power, also supported Assad, providing military aid, training, and financial support to Syrian government forces. Iranian-backed militias, including Hezbollah from Lebanon, played a significant role in bolstering Assad's forces. On the other side of the conflict, the U.S. and its allies, including Turkey, Saudi Arabia, and Qatar, initially provided support to various opposition groups. The U.S. backed moderate rebel groups and provided airstrikes against ISIS, while Turkey supported rebel factions with the aim of both fighting Assad and curbing Kurdish influence in northern Syria. Saudi Arabia and Qatar provided funding to opposition groups as part of their broader strategy to challenge Iran's growing influence in the region. The involvement of these foreign powers only further complicated the situation. Rather than bringing about a peaceful resolution, their involvement deepened divisions and prolonged the conflict. 2. The Kurds and the struggle for autonomy. One of the most significant and complex elements of the Syrian Civil War was the role played by the Kurdish population. The Kurds, an ethnic group spread across Syria, Turkey, Iraq, and Iran, have long faced oppression and marginalization in the countries where they live. In Syria, the Kurds were initially caught between the competing factions, but they began to play a more prominent role as the war went on. The Syrian Democratic Forces, SDF, a Kurdish-led militia, emerged as a key player in the fight against ISIS. The U.S. partnered with the SDF in its efforts to defeat ISIS, providing training, weapons, and air support. However, this alliance was controversial, particularly for Turkey, which viewed the Kurdish fighters as terrorists aligned with the Kurdistan Workers' Party, PKK, a Kurdish separatist group that had been waging an insurgency against Turkey for decades. As the war progressed, the Kurds in Syria pushed for greater autonomy, particularly in the northern regions. The U.S. withdrawal in 2019 and Turkey's military operations in northern Syria complicated the situation, leaving the Kurds vulnerable and undermining their hopes for self-rule. 3. The human cost, a nation in ruins. 1. The toll on civilians. The Syrian Civil War has exacted a devastating toll on the civilian population. According to estimates from the United Nations and other organizations, over 500,000 people have died in the conflict, with millions more wounded. The war has also displaced over 12 million Syrians, both internally and as refugees in neighboring countries like Turkey, Lebanon, and Jordan. The brutality of the war, including airstrikes on civilian areas, the use of chemical weapons, and the deliberate targeting of hospitals and schools, has resulted in widespread suffering. The war has displaced entire communities, leaving them without homes, jobs, or basic services. The infrastructure of Syria, once a relatively developed country, has been destroyed, and rebuilding will be a monumental task. 2. The refugee crisis. The Syrian refugee crisis is one of the largest displacement crises in modern history. Millions of Syrians have fled their homes to escape the violence, seeking refuge in neighboring countries or attempting perilous journeys to Europe. The refugee crisis has had far-reaching political, social, and economic impacts, with many countries struggling to cope with the influx of refugees. Europe, in particular, has faced significant challenges in managing the flow of refugees, leading to political debates over immigration policies and border controls. Meanwhile, countries like Turkey, Lebanon, and Jordan, which host millions of Syrian refugees, have had to provide humanitarian assistance and shelter while grappling with their own economic and social pressures. 4. The endgame, a conflict with no clear resolution. As of 2021, the Syrian civil war shows no sign of ending anytime soon. While the Assad regime has regained control over much of the country, large parts of Syria remain outside government control, including areas held by Kurdish forces and various rebel factions. The U.S. and other foreign powers continue to have a presence in parts of Syria, complicating efforts to negotiate a peace settlement. The war has become a protracted conflict, with no clear victor and no clear path to peace. The future of Syria remains uncertain, And the lessons of the war underscore the complexities of modern warfare, the challenges of foreign intervention, and the devastating human cost of prolonged conflict. Final thoughts: the unseen aftermath. The Syrian Civil War, now entering its second decade, stands as a somber reminder of the power of unrest and the fragility of peace in the modern world. It has reshaped the Middle East and continues to reverberate across global politics. For the people of Syria, the war has been a catastrophe, one that has destroyed their country, divided their society, and left millions struggling to survive. While the conflict is far from over, the world must remember the human cost of the Syrian Civil War. It is a war that has revealed the complexities of global intervention, the rise of extremism, and the ongoing struggle for power and autonomy. Whether Syria can recover from this trauma remains to be seen, but the echoes of this conflict will likely continue to shape the region for generations to come.